Just to remind you, we continue this morning in a series of five worship services, 5 sermons in the month of July about the ministry of reconciliation and forgiveness. Anytime I go to the movies or read a novel, and that's as often as I can, I always look for outcomes of redemption and reconciliation. In a movie, if there's no redemption or no reconciliation, somehow then, give it a half of a star, maybe. I love stories that show us how to live into redemption and reconciliation. I love stories that show us how to live in the tensions between the good and the beautiful and the bad and the ugly, which is the way life is, I think, that bring people to a place of reconciliation in their lives. In the light of the events of this week in Baton Rouge and in Minnesota and in Dallas, it seems a little odd or maybe out of touch with reality that I've just lost it somehow, that I would start out with a story or illustration from a day in September 1862. But trust me, maybe it'll work. It's a little-known story of Civil War that I think illustrates what I want to say. The Reverend Frederick Augustus Ruckley was the pastor of the former German Reformed Church and now United Church of Christ in Middletown, Maryland, in this area, during the Civil War, and particularly on September 14, 1862, during the Battle of Antietam. On that day, it is reported that 23,000 soldiers, we would presume men, but mostly boys, were slaughtered on both sides of that war. And being on the Mason-Dixon line, Pastor Ruckley served soldiers and their families of both northern and southern sympathizers, right in the middle of both sides of that war. He welcomed both sides into the church and indeed into his home, even at his table for food. He was the pastor of all the people that awful day at Antietam and in the 10 to 12 years following that battle. He had a reputation for holding folks, even those who were enemies to the death, even those who were in opposition to each other in the strongest sort of way. He held them in loving care, the way that Jesus talks to us about in this text from Matthew this morning. As I've read the Civil War history up against our gospel text from Matthew, I am absolutely convinced that on September 14, 1862, Pastor Ruckley put our text from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount to its ultimate application. As a church leader, as a community leader who gave its all to being pastor to all the people, no matter who they were or where they were on life's journey. And I dare say it's the same kind of ministry we celebrate in your life, Beth, this day. And for that I am truly grateful, as we all are. It's the kind of ministry that you would envision here at CUCC in 2016 and beyond. A church committed to and skilled at helping people come to the reconciliation table. To walk away from that table more together than when they first sat down. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Did you notice that Jesus is fond of setting up the context, setting up the conversation about his call to change from the old to the new, from the old law to the new way of living by saying, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you. In other words, no matter who a person is or where they are on life's journey, no matter how they are treating you, we are called by Jesus to love them and to pray for them. And for me, that means to encourage them. to step toward them, to invite them to table, and to sit at table with them. And I believe it means being able and willing not only to build this table, but to sit at it together, seeking reconciliation. Now, why does Jesus command such a hard thing of us? Why? Couldn't you just kind of do what most pastors do today? Take it easy on us? No. Why indeed? He gives a rather long answer, but I think a convincing one. Jesus' new way is to love and pray for enemies so that you may be children of God. For God, he says, makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? You know, that's easy stuff. That's what Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think it was, called cheap grace. Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Oh, it was this unfortunate slam on the Gentiles at that moment. But do you get it, my friends? Jesus calls us as his followers to be his body in this time and in this place, to make this kind of love foundation, our MO for the way we live. The way we live with ourselves, the way we live with each other. Now, why does Jesus call us to do such a difficult thing? Why? Because I believe that's what God does. That's what God's love and Jesus' way of loving looks like in the world. Jesus' humanness, his being incarnate, if you will, just like us, is the only way God can show us how to be a loving, God-like life. Jesus was a man who was persecuted, harassed, tortured, eventually killed in the most horrific kind of way. All done, though, out of his willingness and commitment to live the life to which God had called him. Sort of begs the question, I think, of what are we willing to put ourselves out there in full, open, truth-telling ways that challenge ourselves and others to live fully and totally outside of our comfort zone. I got a feeling that the four women who represent us today in West Virginia have been outside of their comfort zone this past weekend. I've spent too many trips in Honduras meeting hundreds of people there over the last 15 years to know that it would be any different. But what a wonderful transforming opportunity that is to get outside of our comfort zone a little bit and be stretched and to learn to love in a new kind of way. To put ourselves in the midst of the community fray. Now, the God revealed to us by Joel, the prophet, in the Hebrew Scriptures, is the God who in the story of redemption and restoration brings reconciliation after years of isolation and exile had taken away from the people who had been in exile. In this lovely poetic text, God forgives, God reconciles. When Joel says, I will repay you for the years that the swarming locusts have eaten. This is just a very personal aside, but I had to turn and look at my wife as Marcia read that, because that text was read at our wedding 27 years ago, because given the kind of life that I had lived for the previous 20 years, God was truly in that moment repaying for the years the swarming locusts had eaten in my own life. So that's a powerful text for us, and I hope for you. The God revealed to us by Joel is the God who covenanted with the people to never put them to shame again. The God revealed to us in Jesus does not shame or degrade people, no matter who they are. That's the new way. That's Jesus' orientation. Love intended to forgive and reconcile. By example, by his speech and sermons, by his living and dying witness, by his stories and parables, by his giving comfort to living with and eating at that reconciliation table with those who were despised and left out and oppressed. Jesus calls us to do the same. He calls us to change from the old laws to the new ways of living. When we back up in chapter 5 in the translation by Eugene Peterson called The Message, Jesus says in verse 9 that you are blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family, when you discover your place at the table of reconciliation. This is exactly why I believe it is so imperative for us here in this day and in these days ahead to explore topics and questions that are usually judged in the church to be too hot to handle. Topics that clergy and church leaders and really all church people are facing in their lives and in their communities this very day, but not many churches have been willing to talk about them. At least not in ways that bring about reconciliation and a hope for a different kind of future. I just volunteered recently to serve on a new working group in the Chesapeake Association of the United Church of Christ to work on racism and white privilege. And at our first meeting, I listened to the people in that group, the people of color, who just really slammed the church and pastors who are unwilling to talk about these kinds of tough issues. And I challenged the group and said, we need to learn how to talk with each other first before we start putting programs together for the rest of the churches. So let's all struggle with each other. The 5 of us who were white, the 5 of us who were black. I think that's what we're going to do. I hope that's what we're going to do. Well, let me say in all fairness, some folks are talking about these topics that are so difficult these days, but they're more likely, this day at least, to be talking about them in the streets, in bars, in the media, in Baton Rouge, in Minneapolis, and in Dallas, and in many other cities around this country today. Let me put it this way. You have heard that it was said that we are not talking about controversial issues or conflict in the church, or to say or do something that offends, much less try to come to reconciliation about them. But I say to you, we are called to love each other and to respect each other and to care for each other in ways that allow us to be honest, truth tellers, open and clear with each other so that we are in one spirit and in one to support each other, not necessarily in agreement with each other about these issues that might divide us. No matter who we are, or what we believe, or how we vote, or how we see the world around us, my friends, there's great reason to find these strong core areas to which we can be reconciled and live in them and out of them. So what does the table of reconciliation look like? People gathered around a table who are willing in respect and love, not necessarily appreciating or accepting the ideas or opinions or views of the other, but respect nonetheless. To talk and explore those things that face us as we seek to be the living church of Jesus Christ. People gathered around the table that reward us for inviting those who are different, who look different, who hold very different, if not threatening views and opinions and ideas. You know that I believe that this table spread for us is the table of reconciliation. It's where it begins. This table which we celebrate each Sunday in this church is indeed a table of reconciliation, a place of meeting, the place where God and all humanity are at table. Even though all of us here, I know, don't necessarily agree with the deeper theological meaning of this table, much less agree on the words that ought to be said when we are handing out the bread or offering the cup. This table still seems to represent the work of the people in and through the unlimited grace and forgiveness of God. You have heard that it was said, you shall talk with those who look like us and who think like us and who keep their ideas if they are different from ours to themselves. I say to you, ask the other who doesn't think like us to share their ideas and beliefs, to listen to them, so that they can understand where they can understand where we're coming from, we can understand where they're coming from. To share your thoughts and questions and hope in ways that sustain a new, respectful, and loving relationship. Now, last Sunday I mentioned some of these issues facing us as individuals, as families, as faith communities, and as a society. Moreover, I said that this ministry of reconciliation requires the truth. It insists on the truth being told with love. The ministry of reconciliation insists on forgiveness being offered and received. But I remind you, once again, that is when both parties, when all parties agree in the first place to own their own actions and thoughts and take responsibility for themselves. So telling the truth to ourselves, telling the truth to each other and to God, indeed telling the truth to power, for that matter, is where reconciliation begins and ends. I spoke last week about one of the topics that I thought it's truly important that we engage in the church, and it has to do with racism and privilege and guns and mass killings and police killing young black people, and then in turn, a black man killing police in Dallas. I spent a good bit of time on Facebook this week because I wanted to see what people were saying about all of this. Didn't anticipate that we'd have the material or the examples of this so powerfully put in our face this Sunday when I was thinking about this last Sunday. Greg Carey, who's a professor of New Testament theology at Lancaster Seminary, is a great person to have as a friend on Facebook because he promotes dialogue with some of the great Bible scholars around this country all the time. He said, with Alton Sterling and Philander Castile dead, I find myself wanting to say something about police restraint and the militarization of police. I want to say police shouldn't shoot people, shouldn't even draw their weapons because they feel threatened. I want to say these things. But Alton Sterling and Philander Castile were black men, like so many others, and it can't be reduced to best practices. In the end, racist people in a racist society are killing black people in many, many ways. We may face up to this truth and commit ourselves to justice with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And then Derek Shackelford, who's a pastor in a church here in Baltimore, with one of my dear friends, lives in Frederick, African-American pastor, a wonderful young man, posted on Facebook, "All lives matter, question mark. No one ever said they didn't. And if they do, some of my friends who have been vocal about ISIS or Hillary Clinton's email or voting for or against Donald Trump, or if Kevin Durant going to Golden State is a good idea, and Derek is a great basketball player and former coach, have been noticeably absent and silent when black men are killed in particular. Yes, people can say all lives do matter, especially when they don't have to live in fear of their own lives every day. Just some of the rhetoric and comments out there trying their best to promote justice solutions to horrific circumstances. And I ask us to consider how we really come to reconciliation table on this issue and in this problem in our country and world. Indeed, is it our task? Is it our responsibility to tackle this kind of social issue or problem in the name of the church, in the church? Dallas is, and I'm going to finish, Dallas is a very interesting community. A lot of tough things have happened over the years, but the current report is that they've made great strides in reducing the number of black men killed by police. They've made great strides in reducing fatalities and reducing arrests, unnecessary ones. Of all the places, come at that table of reconciliation with a gun and kill 5 white police officers. My God, how awful. So the work toward reconciliation and hope moves a little forward, and then it moves back. So I ask you, from my heart and from yours, what is it that each one of us can do this week? What can each one of us say to another to help change what's happening in our society, in our world? I know there are lots of little things that bug us, and we need to have some reconciliation with people. Some of them seem petty when we think about the events on a larger scale in our society, don't they? But when they're happening to us, and someone in my family has slighted me or didn't invite me to the party, and we feel resentful and stop talking to them, it's hard. And so we live in the tension between those kind of little things that happen and these big things that are happening all around us. And somehow, hopefully, coming to a table of reconciliation together on all things, we will be able to live together as Jesus would have us live together in peace and love and hope. It is my prayer that that will be true for you this day and for me.